Hey everybody, and welcome to another edition of Board Games Hitting My Table. This is where I take a look at all of the games that I have played over the last couple of weeks. This episode covering the second half of February 2025. Now, I don't have too many games here to talk about, and the games I am talking about are fairly light, so it's going to be a quicker video than usual. But before we get started, I want to give a shout out to the show sponsor, kienda.co.uk, who are my go-to online retailer. And if you use the link in the show notes or the QR code, then you can get 5% off your first order. But let's start with Foundations of Metropolis. So if you're not aware with this game, it's basically a reprinting of Foundations of Rome, but in a much more sensible size with much more sensible components. But I believe the gameplay is identical. So we played this one at 4 players, which I think is the optimal player count because you play on a bigger grid and it's much more interactive. So super streamlined little economic game as you are claiming these different units on the board by drafting these cards. In a simple slide row system, so the newer the cards, the more expensive they are, and then you are basically plotting those pieces of land with your markers, and then you can build your little polyomino buildings on those spots to generate you income, generate you population, and even place these civic buildings that will piggyback off the other buildings surrounding it. Now, I didn't really get much momentum in this game. A couple of my opponents got some really good deeds down early and managed to get some really big buildings down, which gave them a huge jump, especially when it came to the population, and it was hard for me to make any ground up. But still thoroughly enjoyed this one. So smooth, easy to play. Definitely has that wide net in terms of who it can capture and who would enjoy this one, because more seasoned Euro gamers are going to enjoy it, as well as complete gateway gamers, in my opinion. So thoroughly impressed with Foundations of Metropolis, and that one's definitely going to be sticking around in my collection. Moving on then, I played a 2-player game of Kahuna, a classic from the Cosmos line, abstract strategy game as you're trying to control these different islands, playing these cards and building these bridges. If you have the majority of bridges surrounding an island, you'll kick the other player off, which can have a kind of chain reaction. The game is actually really interesting, but I think the scoring system is a little bit off because you play 3 rounds, which is 3 times through this deck. The winner of the first round, as in the player who had the most presence on those islands, will get 1 point. The second round is 2 points, but the third round is the difference between the two. So I think I managed to win the first 2 rounds, which meant I was obviously 3 points up, which gave my opponent a huge mountain to climb, which they couldn't overcome. I think this game is actually, although I really enjoy it, I played this with a close friend of mine not too long ago, and we had probably the most competitive and thrilling game of Kahuna that I've ever played. And since that point, I've not really been able to reach those highs again. So I think I might move on from this one, despite me enjoying and appreciating it. I think I don't really want to tarnish my opinion on it. So that is Kahuna. Some smaller card games now. We played a 3-player game of Kabanga, a lovely little shedding game. I spoke quite highly of this one, and I still do. The game does pretty much play you, but it's something about it that has a lot of fun to offer. But basically, it's a game you're shedding your cards by playing these numbered cards of different colours, and then depending on the gap between the 2 cards, the other players can throw their cards away, which will give them a little boost. And that was fun. On that same session, we played a 3-player game of Trio and also a 3-player game of Scout. We played 2 games of Trio. I didn't do very well on that one either. I think my memory was a bit frazzled. It's nice to get Scout back to the table. I always speak highly of Scout. I think it's a really well-deserved game in terms of how popular it's become and how well received it is. But for some reason, I don't really play it very often, and I can't quite answer why I don't play it as often as I should do. It just seems to always lose out its table time. But nice to get that one back after so long. Enjoyed my game of that one. We played a 4-player game of Bomb Busters. So introduced this one to my girlfriend the first time she played it. So we did start again from the beginning. A little bit rough to start with, but after that we started to play the game quite well. I went through the first few scenarios, and it was nice to play something without a competitive edge for a change, I suppose. Nice that this game is fully cooperative, and the stakes feel quite low in this deduction game, where you're trying to snip these wires by finding pairs between all the different players, using some very simple deduction methods. So I'm not sure if I enjoyed it as much as I did the first time, but it's still a really nice design that I can certainly see why so many people do enjoy it. We played a 4-player game of Raise. So this was actually my hidden gem of 2024 when it came to my Chairman's Choice Awards. This one, interesting little kind of a chicken-style card game, as you are wagering on yourself to have the most of a certain type of card in your hand, but the value of these cards changes based on these dice that are rolled. And then you can basically try and drop out of the round, or you can keep on fighting to be the last player remaining, which will give you a nice bunch of points, but you'll also gain points based on the cards that other players have donated. So again, sometimes if you're going to fight, it might be worth fighting to the end so you win them all, but you know, the more you fight and if you lose, the more points you're giving to your opponent. So cool game. We played a 2-player game, or I played a 2-player game of Lost Seas. So this is quite an interesting game actually, because I bought this game as a kind of a basket filler really, just so I didn't have to pay shipping. And since then, this one probably is played more than any other bigger game that I've played. So it's a puzzly style game, as you are building up this kind of frame of these different scoring conditions. You've got a vertical and obviously a horizontal axis here, and then you're drafting these tiles to populate them and trying to score based on the wants and needs of these different objectives. So some might say, well, have exactly, 4 boats, or have more boats than any other symbol, or have no waves, and so on. And it's one of those games where obviously the more you play it, or the longer the game goes on, the more difficult it is to complete each of those objectives, because sometimes they're conflicting, sometimes it's super narrow the chances that you'll get them done. But there's something about it that works. It's remarkably smooth. And with a 2-player game, you normally are playing with a variant, which means that you are, I think when you choose a tile, you get rid of another one before your opponent gets their go. I do away with that. I just put one more tile than the number of players, and then just do a simple drafting system, which I think works a lot better and it doesn't feel as nasty. But you don't see as many tiles, which can affect the balancing. But the game is so fast that it doesn't really bother me. So that is Lost Seas. I played a 2-player game of Fairy Ring. This is actually the first time I've played this game at 2 players, and I have to say I don't think it's the optimal player count. In fact, I think it's the weakest out of the 3 different player counts. You can play at 2, 3 or 4 players, but it's still fun. But I think it's more fun when you are jumping on with other players, because this is quite an interactive game where you're drafting these cards and moving your fairy based on these mushrooms that you play, and you move not only on your own cards, but you also move on your opponent's cards. And depending on where you land, they'll get a bonus, and also you'll get a bonus. So it feels like like something like Machikoro or something like that. And the more players you interact with, just the more fun it is. But still, it works well. I think I did quite well, because I managed to play these spring cards really early in the game, and because there were fewer players, only 2 of us, these cards score when fairies fly past you. And of course, with fewer cards in the mix, I was getting flown past quite a lot. That managed to get me quite a few points. So that is Fairy Ring. Again, I'll probably not table this as much at 2 players from this point on, but I wanted to see how it worked. Staying on the lighter games, we played, again, on that same session, we played a 2-player game of Captain Flip. Now, this is a game that scales really well, because it is multiplayer solitaire, essentially. The only thing that will affect the other players is how quickly you populate the board, which will mean that you can end the game on your terms rather than your opponent's terms. But very simple set collection methods. You're just drawing a tile from the bag. You can choose to keep that side, or you can flip it over without looking at it and then not have the ability to flip it back. So it has this very small little hook, like a push your luck hook. And all these different characters will score in different ways. I actually managed to draw a couple of these bombers really early, which are like these They're really good for points, but if you get too many of them, you automatically lose. And fortunately, I managed to get the monkeys that will flip them over, and managed to make up for that. But still wasn't enough. My opponent played really well and managed to score loads more points through, I think it was mostly the chefs that were scored based on the rows. And also each round they had the map, which means you're getting passive points. But if you haven't played Captain Flip, I suppose if you don't really like games, you might bounce off of it and not appreciate it. But if you are always on the kind of hunt for accessible family weight style games that anyone can enjoy, this is a really good one, and I highly recommend looking at it. So that is Captain Flip. And the final game for my own collection here is Spectacular. So one of my favourite games from 2024. Love this puzzly tile and dice drafting game as you're building up this little zoo. I mean, the theme is really pasted on, but basically you are trying to create groups of certain terrain types, and they're multiplied by these tiles that have these little hearts on. But each tile needs a die on it that you are drafting from your own pool, but also from these boards that will pass around amongst the players in kind of an open drafting system that you only have access to that round. And because you can see what your opponent chooses, you can kind of have a good idea about what's coming up next. So it's not like a closed draft, it's like an open closed draft, because you can see what's coming up rather than just speculating, which I think is a really underdone way of using that pass and draft system. Now, I think out of all of the games I played of Spectacular, this one might have been the tightest in terms of not getting many points. Didn't really seem to work as well as I would have liked, mainly because of the objectives I had were really difficult. But still thoroughly enjoyed this one. I think it's such a fun game, and I think the ratio between the decisions you're making and the length of the game, because it's only like 20 to 30 minutes, is fantastic. So probably one of the richest filler style games you'll find, and it doesn't feel like a filler despite being so fast, and it continues to impress me. And I wonder if they're going to support this game more with future material, and I hope they do, because it's so much fun, and I like the system of the game. So that is Spectacular. And the only other game that I played that is a friend's copy is that we played Smartphone Inc. So we played Smartphone Inc. with I think it's called the 1.1 upgrade, which is the first expansion, which makes the game a lot tighter with lower player count. So we played a 3-player game in this area control Euro style game with an economic edge. Now, I really do like the action selection system in this game, as you are overlapping these two discs, or these two tablets, I suppose, and that will show the actions you can take. And those actions will be things such as investing in new technology, traveling around the map to go to new regions, just producing mobile phones, and so on. I think that's really neat. But I don't know, I think the more I play this one up, the more I'm struggling to find the fun factor of it. I mean, I think a big part of the game that I didn't really enjoy as much is because I got absolutely smashed. But that's fine. But still, yeah, this one, I don't know, I don't really look forward to playing it. And when I'm playing it, it's fine. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's just a little bit too zero-sum, I think. And one thing I will say, it doesn't really outstay its welcome either. It's pretty fast and punchy. Good ideas, but I think it could have done with a little injection of fun. I don't know, maybe that's just me. That's Smartphone Inc. So that's it, really. That's all of the games that I have played. Hopefully something on here has caught your attention and you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel and check out my other content too. And for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye-bye.